football, I mean, admittedly, there's some data on head trauma, et cetera, but football that's different from irreversible, that's different from losing your penis and testicles. If you have another minute, I would like to stand on the neutral line, and I would like to have one of you do this to me about a claim that you want to see. If I wouldn't ask you to do it unless I was willing to do it myself. The goal is not for you to convince me. The goal is to see if the reasons I have for standing on the line justifies the line I'm standing on.
Okay, so the statement is people under 18 should be allowed to change their sex. Okay, so 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Just kidding.
Okay, I do have a question to start.
Yes.
To begin.
So go over there because of the microphone.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep. To start, why do you strongly disagree?
Oh, you don't have to because I have one. I strongly disagree because I don't believe that people under 18, in particular, the closer you go to age 1, the more true this becomes. I don't believe that they understand what's at stake. I don't believe that they have an opportunity to truly explore their sexuality, their sexual orientation, their embodiedness. I think it's too young.
But is this your only reason? So your main reason is because they are too young to decide?
My son wanted to dye his hair, and he had to have a doctor's note. No, I'm sorry, he had to have a parent's note. So if you can't buy alcohol if you're under 18, you can't go in the military if you're under 18, you can't buy a gun if you're under 18. So why would you be able to have bottom or top surgery or have hormones? You know, part of that gender reassignment surgery, or it goes by a few names. You can never have an orgasm. You can never live. So there are multiple reasons why people are too young to make that determination.
To play devil's advocate, I know people would say that you are essentially encouraging young people to be miserable, and that many of them will commit suicide. How would you respond to those?
Those suicide numbers have been debunked. Colin Wright has some excellent stuff on that. And so the question is, what percentage of the people, of young people who want to go through with this procedure have given it sufficient thought to know what they're actually getting into? And Abigail Schreier writes about this in her book, Irreversible Damage. You're talking about irreversible damage is what you're talking about. And before you decide that you're going to do irreversible damage to your genitals, you should at least be 18. At least. I personally think you should be 21, but I'm willing to compromise at 18.
You said that the main problem is their age in
That's
this
correct.
decision. So should we allow people over 18
Absolutely,
to change their sex?
100%.
And why is that?
You have determination over your own body. If you want to smash your head into the wall, I can't stop you. We can't put a police officer in front of everybody to do that. We can't. But at over 18, at when you're over 18, hopefully at that point in your life, you'll have more life experience to be able to decide if that's something you want to do, and then you can live with the consequences. But if you're younger, it's not clear that you could have understood the consequences in the first place.
My pushback would be, if we're allowing people over 18 to run their head into the wall, why should it be okay to let people, or why isn't it okay to let people under 18 to run their head into the wall?
Because they don't understand the consequences of the behavior. They can't, because you're talking about, one, they don't understand the consequences, and two, many people, specifically thinking about the book I just referenced, Irreversible Damage by Abigail Schreier, have talked about a clustering effect. This comes out in clusters among groups of people, particularly young girls, teenage girls.
But if we agree that there is significant damage from these
Oh,
procedures.
irreversible damage.
It's great. So we agree on that. Why shouldn't we just say that it shouldn't be allowed for anybody?
Okay, two reasons. One, that's not the question, but I'm happy to answer it anyway, because self-autonomy and bodily determination are, if there's anything you should be able to control, it should be your own body and your own life and your own personal sovereignty. And there are actually some people who are legitimately trans, who have legitimate gender dysphoria. The problem is that that's grossly overdiagnosed in younger age groups.
Do birthdays determine if you're mature enough to do something to your body? What if a 16 years old is enough, it's mature enough to like decide what, I don't know, what
I don't
they
think
should
that's
do?
possible.
Okay, but then why do you say like a 25 years old can decide it? Like how do you, like people are all different. Like how do you define at which age should they do that?
Just consistency, the same age in the United States that, I can't say for Hungary, but we have certain rules in the United States for when we can do certain things. Guns, buy a gun, buy alcohol, go into military service. A 16 years old, you're barely old enough to get a driver's license. If you're barely old enough to drive, then to have your genitals mutilated, that seems like that's quite something. There has to be some cutoff, and the cutoff should be the same ages that we have in other countries. Oh, she wanted to ask a question.
Hi.
Hi.
Would you maybe change your mind a little bit in this scenario where an intersex person has been misdiagnosed, their gender assignment at birth was incorrect because their genitals were not...
Yes, I would change my mind, but I read Alice Dreger's book, Galileo's Middle Finger, and one of the things that she talked about in that is, it never occurred to me that identical twins would not want to be conjoined. I just thought that was the goal. And I'm 56, so when I grew up, if you were intersex, the doctor kind of made a decision and pushed you that way. But now the thinking is, well, you can still be intersex and you don't need to make a choice. So I would think that, I guess it would depend,
In Hungary, you can't be intersex. You still have to be male or female.
Legally, but not biologically.
No, yeah, obviously. Yeah.
So I guess that's I guess it would depend. I guess the answer to that is it depends. Did the doctor scrape off what is perceived to be the penile tissue? I don't know. I guess the answer is it would depend.
Yeah. Okay.
There are variables.
Okay.
So now remember to ask the $1 million, the most important thing in the whole exercise is what would it take to change my mind? That's the most important question here.
Okay. Should I?
Well, you can ask other questions if you want, but that has to come at some point.
I see, yeah. To play devil's advocate again, I think where people supporting these surgeries are coming from is they think that it's very important that people can feel comfortable being the gender that they want to be. Why do you value bodily harm, or why is avoiding bodily harm more important to you than this other?
Well, how do we know they're going to feel comfortable in those bodies? That's a huge assumption.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, it could be quite the contrary. In fact, we know from the data on detransitioning, and I can talk about that, we know that there are people who detransition and feel like they've made a horrific mistake. And at that point, it's too late. There's irreversible damage.
Okay.
But it's irreversible damage that someone does to themselves over 18, which is very different than irreversible damage that we do to children under 18. Those are fundamentally different categories of things.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, I could ask more about over 18, but it seems like maybe we...
Well, we could make another question over 18. I'd be happy to do that, but yeah, for this one, it's under 18.
Yeah.
So now it's what would it take to change my mind?
Okay, yeah. So what would it take, Peter, for you to change your mind?
What would it take to change my mind? Here's what I would have to have. I would have to have evidence. I would have to have evidence which because of ideological capture by woke people of IRBs and universities in general, we're not even allowed to study detransitioning. You can't get IRB approval. But assuming I had a magic wand and we could look at all the data, people who detransition, people who decided that they made a good choice, what I would need to know to move one line or maybe even two lines over, what I would need to know to move the neutral line is the overwhelming majority of people, this is not a social contagion, the overwhelming majority of people, they did longitudinal studies and they found 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, overwhelmingly they thought this was a good idea. They didn't regret it one iota. They said it was the best thing that ever happened to them. Then I'm more than happy to move to the neutral. In fact, I might even move to the agree, depending on what percentage of people, what percentage of those kids, like said, oh my God, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. The lower that number is, the more to the right I'll go.
Okay. And you're very convinced by the evidence that it does damage?
Well, I am positive it does damage.
Yeah, maybe somebody would say then, we do let people under 18 make risky decisions in certain spheres. We let them play football, for example, and we...
Football, I mean, admittedly, there's some data on head trauma, et cetera, but football that's different from irreversible, that's different from losing your penis and testicles. That's not even in the same category of a thing.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything? Nope. You have anything?
Maybe could I ask, do you think
Yeah.
that it's important that people are able to advocate for surgeries for children under 18?
Yeah, people can advocate for anything they want in a free country.
Mm-hmm. But if you think it's an active harm to society, why allow it?
Free speech. Let the best argument win.
Why is free speech then more important than children possibly having irreversible damage done to them?
Yeah, so that assumes, the assumption inherent in that is that people will buy that. And it is my belief that we can reason to moral conclusions. And if we don't allow people to advocate for the mutilation of children's genitals through this gender-affirming surgery, then you're doing a few things. One, you're saying we don't have enough evidence, or we don't have enough reason to know that this is bad, which is clearly false. And the other thing is those arguments aren't going to go away. They're going to fester. And then you're going to see, I mean, you can speculate about what's going to happen. But what you don't want to do is push it underground.
Well, maybe there's a case to be made for the fact that this question hasn't arisen until now.
Correct.
And maybe more strict sexual mores within society that prevented discussion about these kind of things actually prevented this from happening earlier and prevented this damage from being done to children earlier.
Yeah, we don't. A lot of those mores we know in retrospect, and that's another conversation we can have, turned out to be extraordinarily morally wrong. Like I'm thinking about specific homosexuality, etc. Oh, and that's the other thing, that the trans movement, and Andrew Sullivan has written about this, has largely been an erasure of homosexuality.
Could we say that a more traditional sexual moral code, at least one argument that could be made in its favor, is that it kept very harmful things such as irreversible damage done to children at bay?
It depends on the moral code.
Sure, but
I'm thinking like Islam and radical Islam in Pakistan, and I'm thinking about, so in that sense I would say no.
But you might still agree though that societies that push for a lot of mores that you disagree with, at least you can make one argument for them, and that's that they prevented this from happening.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that if you discount all of the other negative things, and yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be reasonable. Right. All right, we good? Thanks everybody. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Peter.
Thank you.